Welcome, Kerstin. Thanks for joining us. The transition pathway has been launched. We're really excited about it. It's the end of a year of work and the start of more. For industry, it's really an important document that we get this way forward and that we can go to our members saying, this is what we expect from you. This is what the Green Deal will put on your desk. But maybe one step back, what was the reason the Commission wanted to start a pathway? What is it for you? What is it going to bring?
First of all, hi Marco, and thank you very much for having this conversation. I'm very proud of what we achieved together. And policy making, good policy making, is good when it also makes sense on the ground and from the company perspective. And that's sometimes where, between policymakers and companies, we kind of lose the conversation. And because the chemical industry is a case for policy making at the moment, because it's huge. It's, the fourth industry in Europe. It's more than 1 million people employed, but it's also a challenge when it comes to CO2 emissions. And it's an industry that's at the beginning of everything. It's like the alpha and omega if we put in the circularity, because it's at the beginning of all the substances that are being used, and it's at the end when it's being recycled. So there's a policy case for the chemical industry. But at the same time, it's also important to see the business case, because it's an industry that's really totally connected into global value chains. And therefore, we need to find, I wanted to find a process where the two perspectives can actually meet, the policy perspective and the company perspective, the business case perspective. And I think what we ventured out on the transition pathway to break down that transition that we have to do into operational steps where we can work together, where, policymakers, when it comes to timing, for example, but also companies, when it comes to investment, actually know what are the next steps. So I'm very excited about launching this, and I hope it's not only about creating this transition pathway, but actually implementing it.
Thank you for that. We have the same, and I should explain that. When the Green Deal came, I don't think anyone of us knew how big it was. It's huge. We've said we have 4 transitions to go. We need to be climate neutral. We need to be circular. We have the chemical strategy for sustainability with all the challenges to meet that transition. The digitalization comes on top. And when it started, you've seen Cefic say, let's not discuss the what, but the how. I should tell you that was after a year of debate on a dot and a comma. And sometimes in trade federations you have to do. We said we support the ambition to become climate neutral, dot. And what industry normally says is comma, but, if, maybe, if, etc. So the dot was a long debate, we decided. We said the same on we support the goals of the chemical strategy. We said the same on we support the Green Deal, dot. But then came the question, oh gosh, what do we all have to do? And that's where we talked about the sectoral Green Deal. We landed in the ecosystems. We like the word pathway. It will be the start of a long journey for us with the members to explain what comes out of Brussels, where we sometimes use the picture of a rock in the pond. We've just dropped the rock in the pond. Now the circles start to move. Before they're out there in Hungary, Bulgaria, Germany, Spain, it's still quite some time to go.
In a way, we're in the same shoes, because policy making, or in your federation, it's aggregate level.
Yeah.
So how does this aggregate level then break down into really every company's perspective for the business case, which is inputs, which is skills, which is investment, which is markets in the future as well. And to be able to understand these two perspectives and bring them together, this is very much the role we play, in particular with our member states. I would say, we have 27 mothers-in-law, but for you it must be similar. And that's why I want to, really insist also on the need to implement this in a way. But overall, this is a new way of actually policy making, and I think it's justified because we have this huge transition. And I think the chemical sector, together with a couple of other sectors, it's huge, the transition. And it's not the next investment cycle, it's the next, I would say, at least 5 or 10 investment cycles. So we need to have the vision. My former commissioner, Michel Barnier, he always said, il faut relever l'horizon. You have to lift the horizon. And this is really what we're doing here.
Which for us, and I love you to say, because for us it's the same thing. I'm in the commission and say, I'm out there on stage in the Slovak Republic. You are as well, but we're out there, we explain what's coming. It's overwhelming for our SMEs, for the companies. And in this case, we've also said, if we accept the Green Deal, you need to trust us a bit as well in that we'll make it workable over time. Because your initial reaction is to say, make it go away or stop. And we went to our companies and said, if we can get this pathway, if we can get a perspective on what is many, many years to come in changes to make, and if we can sequence the measures in the right order, so that we don't build a boiler for a chemistry that will disappear tomorrow or the other way around, then it starts to make sense, which really then is giving the clarity. So we started with what was our vision, our molecule managers. This is actually the next step. First, maybe until 2030, but we also hope it jumps from this commission to the next, and we can maybe use it for 2 or 3 commissions and update it, use the KPIs and see this transformation happening. Maybe a question is, can we work together on the member states? Because that's the next part. We aim to roll this out in 27 member states. Is that something we can do together?
I think we can. I mean, I have to say that when it comes to the single market, it was often or for a long time seen as a big regulatory machine. And, from the company perspective, oh my God, this admin burden. I mean, it also offers new markets, but, there was a lot of regulation to it. Now, in fact, this year is 30 years of single market. So we are trying to also do some cleaning in the single market. And we see that the single market is not only about removing barriers, it's also about making sure that there is critical inputs available, chips, for example, or raw materials, we're working on it. And then it's also the execution of the single market. And there is now a new understanding also in ministries of the economy about the single market economy. It's not a combination of 27 different economic systems, but it's really a single market economy. So we are starting to develop our tools with the member states together. And one example is supply chains. Now, everybody has understood after Russia, the Russian aggression, after COVID, that we have to take care of our supply chains and we have to understand our supply chains. Now, in order to create that understanding, which is the basis for good policy making, we've now created a network of chief economists of all the member states, and they've developed a tool which is called SCAN. So we try to understand the supply chain, scan it for changes, anticipate if we can. And the fact that, now more than half of the member states already use that methodology, we come to evidence and facts that helps us to act in a better way. And it's really a transformative thinking when it comes to governments. And some governments are more engaged than others, but that also I see as our role to bring everybody on board and to make sure that the implementation of the transition pathway, which is a cooperation between industry, companies, and governments, that this continues and has a good kind of pathway. We're all innovators in our own time on this one, but I see a growing understanding that we need to work and deliver this together.
First of all, we're happy to have it. We're not so happy we're the second, because tourism was the first, but we would say we're the first industrial pathway coming out. We'll use it also to have these national debates with the member states. And actually, it's one question: what's your plan in your country for this industry? And then we will use the pathway document, go to a capital, sit with the unions, which is going to be very important with us, and with all the other stakeholders, but see how the sector has to transform, how to develop, make it indeed single market. Because from the US perspective, the difference between Antwerp and Rotterdam is one gate. It's one area in a sense.
Hamburg, of course, is special.
Hamburg is, of course, special. Tarragona and others, Ludwigshafen. But not only have to debate with these big companies, but also with the small ones. And in that sense, the chemical industry is very diverse, from really small to really large. Maybe the biggest hurdle is for the ones who have their main business in Europe, and where these pathways need to give them a perspective towards the future.
Totally. I mean, when we learned from the tourism pathway, which was the first we have, we're already more in the implementation. And what has come up on the tourism is that we need a data space, actually. We need a platform where certain information about supply chain and best practices can be exchanged. And we actually just yesterday got the prize in the Commission for having the most innovative tool developed, IT tool to support this. But this came out of the discussion. It's not that we kind of invented all of this. It came out of the discussion with the stakeholders, and they are now actually developing this. Now, tourism, you have essentially very small companies. It's a service area. It's not products like chemical pathways. So there is a limited amount where you can compare. But one thing was very different on the tourism is that the member states got in very early.
Super. That's what we need.
Which I think is explained by the fact that for some member states, tourism is, like 20% of the GDP. So there was a bigger interest actually to go there. But I'm very confident that on chemical industry, because as I said, alpha and omega of all industrial value chains, that member states will get involved.
You know me a bit also in Brussels for sometimes strange examples. And I'll use an example not everyone knows, but after The Wizard of Oz came a movie called The Wiz. It was with Diana Ross. And there's 2 songs in there. If you haven't seen it, you need to go to YouTube back. My team is still wondering why I'm doing that, but you have the lion, you have the Tin Man and the Scarecrow who walk down the yellow brick road, and the last song is Brand New Day. And I'm using that example as well, saying what we really need for Europe is, and it's a really wonderful song, Brand New Day, the storyline, why you invest in Europe. But it's my job, I think your job and our CEOs, why you invest in Europe, have that brand new day out there. We actually changed the statutes of Cefic, saying we need to be able to do projects, not just research or advocacy. And those are all bricks in the road or bricks in the pathway. That's why this comparison. We're going to need standards. We need to work on scope 3. We need databases. We need better economic indicators, all of which will help our companies to move on the pathway. And for example, on substance substitution, we have very little data because it's so company to company or market. You want to have the competitive edge. I think it will also bring a lot of extra information to you in the Commission and to us on how is industry moving. And that some of the work Gro has done, for example, with the observatory on the energy supply, the availability of electricity around Europe is where we need much more information. Some companies want to electrify, but there's no copper wire. And that's the philosophy for going to the member states as well. It's not that a technology is good or bad. CCS might be good here. We need to go from primes and models to countries and clusters, and maybe in the end have company and regional pathways. Do you see that work out as well, or will it just be too much work?
Well, it's a method, and it's a method which is very new, because you had the policy doing their thing and the companies doing their thing, and in between you had a gap of frustration normally. Yeah. And also as a policy maker, in particular when it comes to the European single market economy, we've, as I said before, very much regulatory, long processes. But we've seen that life may be much faster. Our planet changes faster. We had COVID, which we hadn't expected. We have a horrible war in Ukraine, which we hadn't expected. So we need to share, in that uncertain world, we need to share more. And it's not my data and your data. I mean, if we can share data, we have better evidence and we can make better policies together. That's why I think this method is very valid for any transition, whether at regional or at single market level. It's complex, of course, at single market level, because it's 27 countries, different industries. The value chains that we saw with COVID are completely across the single market. But, we didn't know about it. Everybody knew their bit of the value chain. So get that right and get that information better. I think these transition pathways as a method are really very useful. And I must say, it's from a policymaker point of view, we want to achieve a certain policy goal, but how do we do it, and what is the sequence, and how do we make sure that we grow the business case rather than stop it? Yep. That's really important to have these insights. And I must say that from my previous job, where it was really about, I was working with the Juncker Fund, it's, companies bring great projects, but sometimes projects don't happen because there's a risk. There's a market risk, a regulatory risk, a supply chain risk, an input risk. So if we look at the risks and then find how together we can de-risk that particular part, then we will be able to scale up innovation. And after all, we talk about raw materials in Europe now as well, but what is really our European business case is innovation. So how do we scale that quicker? That will require cooperation, de-risking, cooperation between public and private, and that I see really as a future model of good governance.
Absolutely. I think there's a benefit as well, which is companies are also humans. And we have a strange word.
Policymakers as well.
Policymakers as well. But for me, we might rewrite industrial policy with the pathways, but it's very much a signal. And there's a word in my language which doesn't happen in too many languages. It's strange. It's called gunnen. So you have giving and granting, but gunnen is different, which is that because we have worked together in the right way, because you did the last project right, I'm giving you the right for success. In a sense, I'm allowing you to also make, and that's gunnen in Dutch. We are a merchant nation from the past, but what I've seen over the times is that it's so important for the companies and the CEOs that they also feel welcome, that their investments are wanted, that people say, we don't have all the solutions, but we'll jump in the boat with you and start rowing together. And I think that's where these dialogues, where the pathway is a tool, where the dialogues can really bring us forward, is sit with the government saying, you have a lot to solve, you have a lot to change, you need to completely reinvent yourself, but we're there with you to help you find the solutions. We'll give the signal that the investment should come here. That's at least my hope of this pathway.
I would say it's even more broad, and that's the advantage of it. But you bring in everyone, for example, the workers.
Yeah.
The skills will be a huge issue, in particular for this industry, but also in the tourism pathway we see it. And now we see all kinds of new thinking about how to upgrade the skills, how to have companies invest in it, how to use new concepts like the battery academy, for example, how to improve that. And there are great ideas also from the workers. Then there's civil society, which in your industry, and we see it also on the raw materials, is really important, because that's, if you bring everybody on board, and this is the transition pathway idea, then you really make good headway, and you create an added value for Europe and for all Europeans, for everyone actually. So that's the ambition. Sometimes we may fail, let's be honest about that as well.
True. Yeah.
So we'll take a step back and and try another way. There will be events that we cannot foresee. I mean, I mentioned COVID and the Russian war. I don't know what the wild cards for the next also political mandate will be, what will happen. But having this permanent conversation also means that we're more flexible to adapt.
I told my team after this year, saying mostly we're all on target, but the fact that we're on target this year is a miracle, because every month something new happened which we didn't see coming, which also has brought the industry together, which I think has helped. It's launched. We're going out. We're having this first dialogue. We're going 27 member states to have these national dialogues. We'll bring it back. Where do you want us to be 1 year from now? We're doing this interview again.
I know we worked on KPIs. Yeah. I want us to have made headway. I want to look at investments made. Yeah. But I also want to be able to say, when it comes to this one conundrum that everybody has, which is energy, I want to be able to say that we've made headway on the renewable energies at the factory gate, because that's two things. So renewable energy at the factory gates, we're increasing the access to it. The price is going down, we'll be able to see where it's going. We will increase hydrogen. We will see that there is a trend in increasing it, because for the industry, it's not only energy, it's also feedstock. And that, to see the positive trend, that I hope we will be able to say, because seeing the trend means you can also take an investment decision on your manufacturing side.
I have one more ambition, which is that always with policy you see that a next commission or a next government invents something new. So my ambition as well is that the pathway will bridge into a next commission, and maybe even to the next one, because that stability is going to be important for us, and that we can come back on it. I have an old colleague who's worked on industrial policy for years and years, and found that the most interrupting, because every time a new government, a new commission comes with a new approach. I think with this pathway we can really make it as a bridge into a next policy cycle, next one, give the clarity on what's going to come.
It's also true on your side.
Absolutely.
Also the companies or the unions, if we can take this as the kind of, it will be an iterative process, even the implementation, yes. I'm convinced. So, but if we can own it, and to shape our future on that basis. And I think there will be enough room still to innovate quite a bit on it. But if we can own this as the method and the path we're going, that would be a good ambition to have, I think.
Thank you for this start. I think we're gonna finish this first discussion, one of many. As said, we're really happy with the pathway. By far not the answer on everything, but a way of working and a way forward. And a thank you to you and your team for all the work this year to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco, also from my side. And let's get going.
Super.